This is a fan-generated show. If you'd like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our new Rumble channel. All your support is greatly appreciated. Good evening. Welcome to Glazov Gang. Thank you so much for joining us this week. I am Annie Cyrus, and I still have the honor to sit in for Dr. Jamie Glazov. I promise you he will be back soon. But I do have a very, very, very extremely important and a special program for you tonight. We do have a guest who's not a first timer on Glazov Gang, but is always an honor to interview him. You're all familiar with him. Brannon Howse. He is an author, researcher, producer, director, writer, you name it, he is. But to me, he's one of the rare, very rare freedom fighters who has not bought into the pressure of the left, Marxist, Islamist, all the enemy who are coming at him. Hi, Brannon. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hey, and you left out one thing. We're also very close friends.
Yes, we are. And you are also my boss on both Lindell TV, Franken-Speech, and Worldview Weekend. So the list goes on. What can I say?
Yeah, you know what? I've never really considered myself that, but which is really interesting because I have a lot of people that now either work for me or they work with a company that I'm overseeing. But I'm not used to having a bunch of people like that. Always have pretty much worked by myself. I have a lot of subcontractors over the years. So it is become weird the last couple of years as we've grown. But I pretty much keep running my day like I always have. Start out in the morning, checking the news, reading the news, updating the websites, doing show prep, all the research I do. I pretty much stay in my office and move from my office to my studio, back to my office, and everybody else is in the control room doing their thing. It's really interesting. I have a lot of people around me. And when I interact with them, it's generally on a fun, social, cutting up with the young guys and Logan, my son. But yeah, it's not a oh, the boss is here and me spending a lot of time telling people what to do. I don't. Very rarely do I tell people what to do because everybody knows what their job is and everybody does it. So I've never really been a guy that's a boss for anybody. I like kind of doing my own thing, and I'm not real good at being a boss in that I don't like to micromanage people, which I guess is one thing would make it easy to work for me because I don't like hanging over people's shoulder and micromanaging them. But yeah, a lot of days go by where these people come into work and they don't ever hear me say, do this, do that, because they all do their job. I do my job. They do their job. And it's a pretty easy team. No drama. Yes. That's one of our hiring requirements is no drama.
Yes, I do love working for you and with the team. It's one of those situations that I take my job very serious, but then at the same time, I know that I get the job done. I got the job done. There's no extra ask of me. I have always mentioned that one of the rare qualities by you, Brannon, while working for you for more than a year now officially, is that you're one of those bosses that show gratitude and acknowledge a good work, which motivates me to wake up next morning and do even better, which is a rare quality nowadays.
Well, thank you. Well, you're a great person to have on our team. We love having you on our team, and you've picked up a lot of slack for both Mike and I with Lindell TV and WVW TV, and we love having you on our team.
Well, thank you. Okay, so tonight on the very long list of your achievements, and what I would like to say, your service to American people by providing so much educational material, religious material, historical material. You have a brand new documentary coming up Sunday, September 18, is the world premiere of it. Brainwashed America Part 2. Tell us about it before we go and take a look at the trailer.
Okay. Well, thank you, Annie. Yes, Brainwashed America Part 2. Brainwashed America Part 1, I put that to bed and finished that in October of 2020. October 2020 is when I finished it. I've been working on this project really for about 30 years, studying the topic of brainwashing. People say, how you work on it that long? Well, studying the topic of brainwashing for 30 years. And then I started writing on the script and giving specifically studying on this for about 4 years, as far as actually working on this particular project, studying the topic of brainwashing for 30 years, writing the script and preparing the documentary for 4 years so far. And I put it to bed, part one, October 2020. I did not release it until February 2021. And the reason why is because there was so much going on with the fall election. I didn't want to get it lost in the fall election of 2020. And then after everything that happened after the election, I thought, oh no, I cannot have this get lost in all this because there was so much going on. And I got so busy working with Mike Lindell, and again, wanted things to calm down a little bit before I released Brainwashed America Part 1 so that people would actually pay attention to it. So I finished it in October 2020, released it in February of 2021. Now I'm ready to release Brainwashed America Part 2. And I got about another 15 hours of post-editing to do on it probably between now and Sunday night when it premieres. So it'll be out 7 p.m. Central Time. The whole thing is free. Everybody can watch Brainwashed America Part 1. They can watch it for free at brainwashedthemovie.com, brainwashedthemovie.com. They can watch part one. If they don't see part one, part two will still make sense. And otherwise, we'll do world premiere of Brainwashed America Part 2 Sunday night, 7 p.m. Central to 10 p.m. at wvwtv.com/live, frankspeech.com. It'll be there. And then we'll put it online. People can watch it again and again, share it with their friends. Part 2 is 3 hours. Part 1 is 2 hours. And part 2 is 3 hours long. And it'll be probably 5 or 6 part series. Probably it's taken me 6 parts to put the entire documentary to bed. I'm going through 12 systematic steps I've come up with after 30 years of studying, 12 systematic steps for how you brainwash a people, a nation. And I've gotten some of the material from my 30 years of research, and then some of it I got from studying a guy named Edward Hunter, who's actually the one who is credited with inventing the term, if you will, brainwashing. He studied the communist Chinese. He studied the communists, how they took over China in 1949 and how they brainwashed so many millions at that time. Now they're a nation of 1.5 billion. But he studied how the communists brainwashed the people of China to go along with the communist revolution. And he wrote the book on brainwashing, a couple of them. And it comes from the word hara washing or heart washing. And then he translated it into brainwashing, which is very interesting because heart washing and brainwashing are really good words to flip back and forth, because the word heart and mind are used interchangeably in the Bible many times. The heart, the mind, the heart, the mind, the mind, the heart, the mind, the soul, their conscience, they're all tied together. And the Bible speaks about the heart being the center of where our intellect resides, or we would refer to it as the mind. So there's the brain, which is just matter. I can do an autopsy and show you the brain. I cannot do an autopsy and show you the mind. The mind is tied to the soul, to the spirit, what often is described as the heart. So I could see where someone would call it heart washing for sure. More accurate word would be mind washing, because brain is matter. The mind is tied to your spirit, your soul. So heart washing, mind washing, brain washing, the battle for the mind. That's where this phrase comes from Dr. Edward Hunter. And then I studied a guy named Dr. William E. Mayer. He was a medical doctor and a psychiatrist, and he was on the front lines of the Korean War as a doctor, but he also studied a few thousand of the POWs of the Korean War who were in the POW camps of North Korea, who were brainwashed by the communists. And he explains what they had done to them without torture, without drugs, no torture, no drugs, no hypnosis. And he explains how they were brainwashed and the consequences. And when I read his writings, this study came out in 1956. When I study his writings, I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's exactly what they're doing here in America. So my work, combined with that of Edward Hunter, combined with that of William E. Mayer, has given me the script for Brainwashed America Part 1 and Part 2.
Wow. Okay, let's do this. Let's take a look at, I believe the trailer is 6 minutes. Let's go look at that so our audience get a bit of a sense. And then when we come back, I have a bunch of questions for you.
MAGA Republicans do not respect the Constitution. They do not believe in the rule of law. They do not recognize the will of the people. They refuse to accept the results of a free election. That's why respected conservatives like Federal Circuit Court Judge Michael Ludwig, has called Trump and the extreme MAGA Republicans, quote, a clear and present danger to our democracy.
Well, DHS says this new terrorism advisory is not based on any actual threats or plots, but it says there's a rise in anti-government rhetoric. Some of it is opposition to COVID public health rules like mask and vaccine measures. Some calls for violent action are based on claims of election fraud.
Our entire government institution, our institutions has started falling to the critical race theory technology, to the woke crowd. And so I'm here to tell you that critical race theory, and I feel you'll go away from here this afternoon believing this in your heart, critical race theory and the whole woke strategy is nothing more than communism 2021.
Absolutely.
It is.
On the issue of critical race theory, et cetera, I'll obviously have to get much smarter on whatever the theory is. But I do think it's important, actually, for those of us in uniform to be open-minded and be widely read. And I want to understand white rage.
This is the story of a soldier who operates your nation's Patriot missile defense systems. It begins in California, with a little girl raised by two moms. Eventually standing at the altar to marry my other mom. I'm U.S. Army Corporal Emma Malone Lord, and I answered my calling.
A sexually explicit comic called Genderqueer was pulled last month from an online Keller ISD library database.
You want to know what it has in it? I'm not going to read it, but I'll tell you. Sodomy, rape, and drug use.
Such brave mothers were labeled as potential domestic terrorists in 2021 by the U.S. Department of Justice and were subjected to being investigated by the FBI.
Let's turn to your outrageous directive sicking the feds on parents at school boards across America. Right here in front of me, October 4th, 2021, for immediate release, you're going to create a task force that includes the National Security Division. What on earth does the National Security Division have to do with parents who are expressing disagreements at school boards?
You truly can't say today, under the Biden administration, that America is any longer a country that serves as the only one in the world, essentially, under the rule of law. Because the rule of law is no longer equal. You can go out during the summer of 2020 and you can destroy city after city, you can turn over police cars, you can burn down a police precinct, you can make noise, you can say we're going to burn down New York City if you don't accede to our demands. And then we really hear very little. I mean, we watch the FBI director say, well, Antifa is more of a theory, and I'm not even going to talk about Black Lives Matter.
We look at Antifa as more of an ideology or a movement than an organization.
Don't we need to come out and say this is a full communist regime operating now in the country?
Well, we should, and that's what we're trying to start to do.
What do you guys think are some of the greatest threats facing the country in the next year or two?
I'd go with the Marxists in the U.S. government.
Wow, so the greatest threat is the Marxists inside the government. Wow. Today, men that act like men are deemed to have some kind of mental disorder. In 2019, the American Psychological Association actually declared, quote, traditional masculinity is psychologically harmful, end quote. Let me make this very clear. The Marxists and the globalists are afraid of conservative, traditional, patriotic men rising up and opposing their overthrow of America. You were in Vietnam. You were shot down, is that correct?
That's correct.
Then you were taken into captivity, and were you taken to the Hanoi Hilton, as they called it?
Yes, everybody went there first. We went over there, fought this enemy, came home, the country developed, and now today, if you said communism, that's not a bad word. When I went over there, it was. We knew who they were. But suddenly now, being a communist isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's just another political agenda, so to speak. Extreme socialism, it's okay. And it's not okay with me. Wow. Absolutely not okay with me. And I don't think we know who the enemy is. We've been We've been slowly brainwashed by somebody or by ourselves or politicians or whatever. But it's clear to me that when communism becomes just a nice old thing, another political thing, then I think we've lost our way.
Predictably will happen in America is what has always happened before. It will turn into a paternalistic, community-owned kind of socialism. I hate to use the word because it sounds just like a bad word these days, but a socialism in its true economic meaning, which drains off so much of the national product in administrative costs, in personnel costs, in special empires that keep a building right along with Parkinson's laws, keep getting bigger and bigger and doing less and less until ultimately chaos results, and the chaos is replaced, as it has always been, by a dictatorship.
Wow. I'm a talker. I'm barely ever speechless. And did I just hear everything I heard?
Yeah. Yeah. You actually have several interesting people in that 6 minutes. And I've got so many people I interviewed for this. One of them, of course, was Terry Turchi, the former Deputy Assistant Director of the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI.
The person on the trailer who said we are in a state of lawless country, right?
Lawlessness. Yeah, we're no longer under the rule of law. Yeah. That guy is not some, provocateur. He was up on the 7th floor, the top floor of the FBI, briefing the FBI Director, Louis Freeh, on a daily basis. Terry Turchi, former Deputy Assistant Director of the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI, saying we're no longer under the rule of law in America. There was 3 other FBI agents there. It was one of the FBI agents, David Baldwin, that said the greatest threat to America are the Marxists in our government. They agreed that we are in the middle of a Marxist revolution. And these guys I interviewed for 4 one-hour town hall meetings here in the Mid-South outside of Memphis, Tennessee. And then, of course, I took some of the clips and put it in this documentary. That was also a recruiting commercial by the U.S. Army, and that was promoting the agenda of the LGBTQ community with our tax dollars.
Let me stop you there, because that has been a question for me, Brannon. And since we just saw it, I want to ask you this. Okay, so LGBTQZF, never-ending alphabet category of theirs. What is the point? Now, not the goal, but the point. If they claim they just want to be who they are, why do they have to shove it down our faces 24/7?
Right, because they're looking for a reaction, and the reality is there are those people that do practice that lifestyle that I don't agree with, and I don't want to act like heterosexual sins or homosexual sins are they're both sins, right? There are varying degrees of sin. But I don't want to play, oh, well, this sin, and wink at that, and this sin, no, sin is sin, all right? Whatever goes against the character nature of God, then that's sin, and that it's serious. And so I don't want to have things we make light of and things then we jump on for whatever reason. So I think we have to be consistent. Say there are things in the heterosexual world we're just as well appalled by as well. But why is this being done? This is being done so that people will react. Now, there are some of those people that practice that lifestyle. They don't make an issue of it. They don't promote it. They don't talk about it. They don't make you have to approve of it. They live and let live. But there is a group of people, cultural Marxists, and one of them was Herbert Marcuse of the Frankfurt School that came to America in 1933. Now, most people don't know who Herbert Marcuse is, but they do without knowing it. He's the one that coined the phrase, make love, not war. He's the one that coined that phrase in the 60s, make love, not war, Herbert Marcuse. And Herbert Marcuse put together what he called what we call a coalition of victims. He called them that too, a coalition of victims. And it was the LGBT crowd. It was feminist. I'm not talking about equal rights for women like voting and that kind of, I'm talking about the idea of the Marxist feminist who really is anti-family, anti-father, against traditional marriage, that feminist. But he's put together the feminists.
I call those people feminazis.
Yeah, exactly. The feminists, the LGBTQ, the poor, the minorities, the immigrants. He took anyone that could be exploited as a victim to make them cannon fodder for his revolution. And he would say to them, who are your oppressors? Who are your oppressors? And the answer he was looking for is, oh, it's the free market people. It's the capitalists, the pejorative created by Karl Marx. It's the capitalists. It's the Christians. And he was trying to create the narrative that the source of all suffering and oppression is Christianity and capitalism. Christianity and capitalism. So you asked me, what is the goal here? The goal is to have us react and say, wait a minute, we don't need to be promoting this lifestyle choice to anyone, much less through our tax dollars. We don't need to be normalizing this within our military. We don't need to be passing legislation that gives special rights to same-sex couples, because everyone has the same civil rights in America. And there are many things that homosexual couples could do. They can sign powers of attorney. They can sign on to special medical legal documents that give them the right to make medical decisions for their, partner, so-called. They can leave their inheritance to them. There are all kinds of things that they can do under the civil laws of our country, just like heterosexuals can do. But what we're doing now is trying to create a special class so that if you don't agree and you say something that's not politically correct, you can be charged with a hate crime or a hate speech or intolerance, right? And that's the objective. The objective is to set a trap for conservatives, for Christians, for people that embrace the Judeo-Christian value system. Set a trap for them so that you can find them, punish them, shame them, criminalize them. That's the goal. That's the objective. So that you can have hate crime laws that kick you off radio, take your Christian or conservative broadcasting license through the FCC. So the Marxists don't care about the victims. The Marxists don't care about the LGBTQ crowd. They don't care about the immigrants. These are all people to be exploited to set up as a victim coalition, shove it in your face, and then when you respond, hey, wait a minute, I'm not for that. I don't want to pay for that. No, my business isn't going to hire that kind of person, a man in a dress. Now they've got you where they want you, and now can use the power of the law to destroy the Christians and the capitalists. That's what it's all about.
Agreed, but here's where the question of hypocrisy comes in. So how come when Muslims throw gays off their buildings are not being attacked? How come when Muslims come in screaming Allahu Akbar, killing Christians in churches, there is no action taken? There is no reaction shown. Where does that go?
Yeah, well, that's because, again, the red-green axis, as you know all about, the red-green axis is protecting, the Marxist of the red-green axis is protecting the green. The Marxists are protecting the green because they don't want people to see this hypocrisy, and they don't want people to point this out so that they can continue to be a powerful coalition that's able to penetrate our government. So it's just, you're right, it is hypocrisy, but you don't see the feminist and the LGBT crowd screaming and hollering about the Islamists. You see them screaming and hollering about the Christians or those that embrace the Judeo-Christian worldview. But again, that's because the Marxists and the Islamists have done a great job at making criticism of Islam out of bounds, regardless of what they do. Honor killings, child bride marriages, as you know, they're out of bounds. You can't say anything. You're a bigot if you do. You're Islamophobic if you do. So this is what we call the new absolutes. This is the new absolutes in America. And there are certain new absolutes that you have to play by if you play by their rules. And if you don't play by their rules, they're going to punish you. And this is one of them, that you can't speak ill about Islam and you cannot point out the hypocrisies of Islam or the Marxists and the Islamists working together. And what you just pointed out about Islamists killing people and hanging them from a crane, which we as Christians would disagree with and do disagree with. And in fact, what's interesting is The LGBTQ community is going to find out that at the end of the day, it's the Christians who don't agree with their lifestyle, but would offer them protection, would offer them shelter, would protect them because we value human life. And so we, the Christians, may be the ones that actually bring the homosexuals or the LGBT crowd, some of them into our homes for safe sheltering from the Islamists. And they're going to go, why are you doing this? And we'll be able to explain, because we are Christians and we understand that God is the originator of life and we don't take life. Life is only taken under two conditions: capital punishment and self-defense. Capital punishment and self-defense. So the LGBT community hasn't found out yet that the ones that will hang them from a crane are the Muslims. The one they're going to protect them are the ones they're attacking, the Christians.
Exactly, as you said, because the Green is very good at playing all the victim cards they can play, from Rashida Tlaib to Ilhan Omar to Keith Ellison to Hussein Obama. Every single one of them, every time something happens, they cry, victim, victim, victim.
Yep.
Again, we just passed 21st year since September 11, and it was last year when Ilhan Omar said, which, by the way, is just to set the record straight, what she said is incorrect, but she did say CARE was established after September 11, even though CARE was established in 1994. But CARE was established after September 11 because some people did something, and we as Muslims knew we're going to lose our civil rights.
Right.
But wasn't she the one who made Congress lift a 181 years law so she could show up with her hijab on?
Yep. And this is all part of the brainwashing, because what you're trying to do is get people to change their values. And one of the things that they learned from the POWs of the Korean War that came home, one of the guys said that it's impossible to brainwash someone until you get them to let go of their values. Until you get them to let go of their values, you can't brainwash them. So you have to set the stage, set the narrative, set the trap, cause the conflict, cause the pressure, cause the confusion, put their mind into a fog. And once their mind has been put into a fog, then they'll let go of their values. And then the brainwashing operation can begin.
That's very true. And a lot of countries already done the brainwashing, of course. But in America, I guess, due part of me is I didn't take mental note of who said this. It was Major William in your trailer who said, what's the name?
William E. Mayer.
Thank you. He did say that brainwashing is the ultimate weapon, right?
Weapon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was the name of his book, actually. Yeah.
I can't help but to think, first of all, thank you, Brannon. Thank you for not only understanding this concept of what they're doing as far as brainwashing Americans, but thank you for bringing it up. And thank you for spending countless hours to put these series of documentaries together. But remember, I come from a country where they tried to brainwash me, and for a while it worked. And here's what I'm going to say. I don't know if I've ever said this on air, Brannon. Part of me today, as the fighter, as the whatever people call me, part of me is still always looking to see where my half brain is going to screw up my life. Because part of my brain still believes, as a woman, I'm half of you, and I have of a brain compared to yours. That's the extent of brainwash.
Yes. Yes. Well, and you know what's interesting is that in the 12 steps of brainwashing, and I'm only able to cover 2 in part 2. Part 1 is just a 2-hour introduction. 2-hour introduction. Part 2, I cover 2 of the 12 steps. And the first one is to remove leaders, to get any leaders of courage and character and morality, and to move them out of the way and away from the general population. And the way we saw this done in the Korean War camps, the POW camps, and our American soldiers, was if you were anyone that had the courage to lead, showed any leadership ability, and you disagreed at all with their worldview, and as soon as they found out if you were religious, boom, off to reactionary camp you went. If you were an officer, a rather high-ranking officer, college educated, but not all people that were college educated, not all officers, but if you were religious, boom, off to a reactionary camp. If you were deeply religious, if you had strong convictions, if you showed the courage to lead, they moved you out of the way. If you said, "Hey, I'm a capitalist," and you were really proud of it, you're going to reactionary camp. And guess what, Annie? They only had to remove, this government study found, they only had to remove 5% of the American POWs in the Korean War away from the general population. Only 5%. So 5% of them went to a reactionary camp. Okay? Leaving the 95% without any leaders. And what they found was that of this 95%, 5% were moved away, as we just said. And what they found was 15% actually participated in helping the communists. So that's 20%. Guess what the other 80% did? 5% were moved away because they were leaders and they couldn't be among the population. Of the group now remaining, 15% actively cooperated with and helped the communists by writing articles, writing statements, drawing cartoons that portrayed the propaganda that they wanted. American POWs drawing cartoons, ridiculing the president of the United States, Truman at the time, ridiculing the war, ridiculing American values, writing statements, writing articles against America for the communists to be used in propaganda, 15%. So 5% moved away. They're reactionaries. They're poisonous individuals. 15% cooperate. 15 and 5 is 20. What did the other 80% do? Nothing.
Follow?
They did nothing. They just sat down and did nothing.
Isn't that what we're facing today, though, Brannon? Seriously.
And that's what we're facing today.
They stole our election right in front of our face.
Yep.
Majority of people didn't do anything.
Yep. You've got the percent that are leading: Donald Trump, Mike Lindell, Steve Bannon, Peter Navarro, Dr. Doug Frank, who I interviewed tonight.
General Flynn.
General Flynn, thank you, who I was just texting with a while ago. And what do? They go after these people, right? They've gone after all of the attorneys around Donald Trump that are investigating voter fraud. So they're taking the 5%, and what they're trying to do is remove that 5%. And we're going to go with that number 5%. Say let's say it's 5%. That's some of the 5% in America that are standing up and saying, we're leaders. We're not going to go along with this. We're going to resist, and we're going to lead people. They're taking those people who I think make up that 5% of America, if that number holds that was in the POW camps for America, and we're going to say for this illustration it does. And they're going after that 5% in order to try to remove their influence from the American people. So we're going to call them subversive. We're going to call them insurrectionist. We're going to call the MAGA group, if you will, as Joe Biden said, a clear and present danger to the United States, that they're lawless, that they don't love, they don't like the Constitution. These are all things that Joe Biden said in his speech in Philadelphia.
Yeah, but
and so they're trying to remove.
But how can anyone believe that conservatives don't love the Constitution when conservatives are the only side of America who are fighting for every single amendment, including Second Amendment, and Biden and his regime are the one who are trying to destroy our Constitution, take away all of our rights? Who's believing his words?
True, but here's the deal. There's a big chunk of Americans that don't know what the Constitution is. If you're to ask them what's the First Amendment, what's the Second Amendment, they don't have a clue. So they don't understand what fighting for the Constitution means, number one. Number two, they're also trying to say to those that do, this is how we will treat you if you lead. If you lead, we're going to come after you. We're going to seize your phone. We're going to investigate you. We're going to prosecute you. We're going to have you have to hire attorneys. So sit down and shut up. So they're trying to make an example of these people so that 5% of America's leaders are either destroyed financially, their reputations are destroyed, or they will back down on their own because they can't and don't want to put their family through it. Now, that leaves us another percentage of Americans, and let's just say it's 15% Americans. 15% of Americans are openly cooperating with the communists. Let's say if that's what's going on as it was in the POW camps of North Korea. That leaves 80% of Americans doing nothing. And I would contend that we're probably not far from that number, that we've got 80% of Americans who are doing nothing. I talked to people after the election, conservatives, ranging from medical doctor to business owner to pastor. What have you seen Absolute Proof, the documentary I produced with Mike Lindell? Have you seen Absolute Proof? No, I have not, and I'm not going to go watch it. Why? I'm done listening to conservative talk radio, television. I'm done being involved. The election proved itself to be futile. They just stole it, and I'm done. And see, what they're trying to do is demoralize us so we don't get involved. So you got a percentage of Americans that have been involved that now are passive and apathetic, and are being demoralized and don't want to be involved anymore because they think it's useless. Then you got the bulk of the American people that are too busy watching Dancing with the Stars. They don't have any education, self-education, to know what we talk about. When we say Sharia, they don't know what we talk about. They can't define Marxism. They can't define globalism. They don't really understand what the Great Reset is, if they've even heard of it. They have no idea what sustainable development is. They don't know what hate speech laws are and what they're really intended to do. They have no clue. They don't care. So we've got a real issue. But this is exactly what the former KGB officer, Yuri Bezmenov, who was, by the way, an expert in propaganda, and he defected. He finally had enough, and he defected and came to America. And he's in my documentary again as well. He's since passed away. But he gave an excellent interview to my friend G. Edward Griffin in 1984. And he said that there are 4 stages for the Soviet Union, now the former Soviet Union, but for the Marxist among us, there are 4 stages for taking down a nation: demoralize, destabilize, chaos, and the new norm. And that's where we're at right now, is the chaos stage. We're in the chaos stage, and the chaos is going to continue until even many Americans will say, I don't agree with it, but I got to put food on the table. And when we move from superinflation to hyperinflation, and we are going to have deflation in certain sectors, we'll have deflation in some sectors, we'll have hyperinflation in others. And when people can't afford to put food on their table, many of them will become passive and apathetic. And once they have you passive and apathetic because you're demoralized, you will surrender. And this is exactly what we saw in the POW camps of North America. Never before in the history of America had we seen so many men die in captivity. In the POW camps of North America, we saw 38%, almost 40%, pull the sheets up over their head, pull the blanket up over their head, and will themselves to die, and were dead within a few days. They became so discouraged and so much despair because of what they were being told by the communists. They weren't letting letters get through to them. Letters that said, we're thinking of you, we're praying for you, here's a care package. They were not letting those kind of letters get through. But if you had bills or a bill collector, believe it or not, the bill collectors from the U.S. were getting some of their mail through to the POW camps in North Korea to the Americans. If your wife was asking for a divorce, that letter would get through. If your girlfriend was writing you a Dear John letter, that letter would get through. And what they made the POWs believe is what the communists were telling them, which is your people in America don't care for you anymore. You're cannon fodder for the capitalist corporatism and this warmongers. Even your own family doesn't care for you anymore. They don't write. Well, they were writing. But the only letters getting through were the ones that would just make a man become disparaged. And they would tell them so many lies about America. And they would never tell them some things that were true. They would never tell you how that was corrected. They wouldn't tell you, oh, yeah, well, the child labor laws where children were exploited or where immigrants were exploited, those laws were changed. or the racism in America and slavery in America, that was outlawed. And here is how there was restitution made in America for that sin. And many of our young people that were in that war, the Korean War, were very young. And they had not been taught proper history. And so they didn't know a lot of this themselves because they had never been taught these things like they should in our schools. So they couldn't rely on their patriotic American education to give them the facts they needed. Remember, this is the 1950s. These men would have been in school in the 1940s. Even in the 1940s, they were not getting the solid education they needed to refute the lies of the communists. And the leaders that could refute it had been moved away. So they began to believe the lies of the communists. They became apathetic and passive. And that's when many of them started to die, willing themselves to die. And they did in bigger numbers than we've ever seen in any war with our prisoners of war, ever.
And isn't that exactly where our education system is going, with Common Core and erasing history and making all the founding fathers a bunch of racists, a slave owner, yada, yada, yada?
Yes, that's where we're going. And then here's what else they did. They made it so that you were dividing people. You divide people. So obviously we've just took off 5% of the people. And then you start having them talk about in discussion groups. They actually had discussion groups. They would actually had a formal curriculum they used. The communists in the POW camps of the North Korean War, they used a curriculum on our POWs. And ironically, Annie, the curriculum was written by a communist group, the Jefferson School, and it was a communist school in New York. So the curriculum was actually written and drafted in New York and then sent over there, and our soldiers were subjected to a curriculum. And they were in the classroom up to 12 hours a day, a lot of times outside standing up so no one could fall asleep. And then they would break them up into discussion groups. And they had to go through that day's lesson, and they had to talk about it and contribute. And if they didn't contribute and take part, every man, you couldn't go to chow. So what they finally got people to do was join in on self-criticism, confessing your sins and your shortcomings and your short failings, self-criticism. And then, of course, what they were also seeking to do is make it so that they had enough dirt on each other, that now everyone had said too much, exposed themselves, and now that everybody knew so much, they were embarrassed that they'd said too much. They also had so many people informing on each other for extra rewards, better food, etc. Nobody trusted anybody because even your own POW would turn you in. Now, they didn't torture you, but what they would do is take you on a walk, Edward William E. Mayer says, and tell them, you've just been, reported, and you know better than this. We expect better of you. And then what happened is people realized they couldn't talk, they couldn't organize, they couldn't trust each other, so they couldn't work together. And what they found was when they got back to the States, and the doctors would walk onto the hospital ward, you would think these men that had been through the POW camps together would have a camaraderie and a brotherhood that was beyond belief, and that they would be chatting and talking and playing cards or checkers, ping pong, whatever, right? No. Dead silent when the doctors would walk onto the ward. Everyone sitting in his own area, not conversing with anyone else. Why? Because they could not trust each other. They had been taught not to trust each other because of informing and informants. That's what's going on in America today. And I've been doing increasing stories on this, including the Facebook being used and communications by Facebook being used to report people's messages about election fraud from Facebook to the FBI for subversive reports. So we're moving to that point. And then what happens is, if you don't join in with the criticism of America, then you must be a bigot. You must be a racist. So now it becomes fashionable to criticize America, to tear down America. And if you don't do it, well, then you must be a racist and a bigot and Islamophobe, etc. So they make it so that even if people don't believe it, they'll join in on the criticism of America in order to fit in, to go along, to get along. This is exactly what happened in Hungary. And when some students tried to carry out a revolution over the communists for a few days, and they poured out into the streets, and wasn't long before the tanks came in and crushed it. But people were shocked at who they saw in the streets. Oh, wait a minute. What are you doing here protesting the communists? I thought you were a communist. No, I'm not a communist. I just had to pretend I was to go along with the system and get along, right? So even people in the streets were shocked to find who was there protesting when they thought it was safe. And that's how, again, you make people feel isolated and alone, and then they become apathetic and passive, and then you're able to take over a country by just a few small steps. That's what my documentary is about.
Amazing. It was just the last few minutes of listening to you, I quickly reviewed, like a little movie in my head, I reviewed the COVID situation, where first people stayed home because they had to keep their job and work remotely, that they started wearing the mask because they had to protect their elderly, then they started running to get the vaccine because they had to feed their family, they couldn't lose their job, on and on and on. Like, everything you literally just went over is the entire series of COVID-19. And later on, when a lot of, unfortunately, death started happening, sudden death, which you've been reporting on literally every day on your daily report board where you report, then a lot of people started saying that we were just trying to keep the job or make my husband happy or didn't want my mother to get upset. Exactly. A lot of them did what they did, including putting that poison in their body, in their children's body, just because they had to, go along to get along. So you're correct that we are already there, but I feel like, was the COVID situation a test? Did they test the American population?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think they were doing that. And I go into that in part one, because here again is what has to be done. You have to, this comes from the Tavistock Institute. The Tavistock Institute was a group around in the 40s, and they studied POW prisoners as well, ironically. And what they determined is that if you can put someone through a series of shock and awe and anxiety, and turbulence, they become more likely to be subject to the implanting of ideas and thoughts that they otherwise would not be. Now, isn't that exactly what happened in America? We freaked everybody out over COVID. We convinced them that you're going to kill your parents and your grandparents if you don't do this and wear a mask and go along. And you got to shut your business down, your church. Anyone that tries to keep their business or church open is selfish and self-centered. And so we convinced a lot of people of a lot of things that weren't true about something that did not have a death rate that was very high at all, and that could be properly treated with the right protocols. But we were able to get people, because of contradiction in messaging, some truth, some lies, some truth, and some half-truths mixed together, and so much contradiction by so many different people that you don't know what to believe. You don't know who to believe. And so you throw your arms up and you surrender to the group herd. And this was the idea of social turbulence. And you could get people to go along with the group herd, and they would do things they otherwise would not do because they don't want to be seen outside of the herd. And that's exactly how you can take a crisis and a virus that did not have a very high death rate at all. Not that people didn't die from it, but you did not have a very high death rate at all, and convince people to act as though this thing had a 99% death rate. Shock and awe, social turbulence, contradicting messages, and then the herd mentality, because people don't want to be seen as standing out and being ridiculed as selfish. And that's exactly what I carry over into part two, along with goal number one, which is remove leaders. And then goal number two is to get people to question their values, question their own values and the underlying foundational values of their country. Because once you can get them to question those values, then you get them to reject those values, then you get them to embrace a new set of values. And your worldview is the foundation of your values, and your values are the foundation of your conduct. You don't have to change your initial worldview immediately. But if you can get them to change their values and thus their conduct, eventually the underlying foundation of their belief system, their worldview,
is in such contradiction with their now new values and their new conduct that they have what's called a cognitive dissonance. And they're saying, well, wait a minute, I claim to be a Christian, but now embracing these new values and this new conduct, and they realize their values and conduct are not consistent with their self-professed worldview. Once they have enough cognitive dissonance, they want to resolve that inner conflict. What they do is they remove the foundation, and they reject their traditional values, their Judeo-Christian worldview, and they replace it with another worldview, be it communism, Marxism, Islam, postmodernism, cosmic humanism, whatever. So you can change people's worldview ultimately by changing their worldview and their conduct and creating this cognitive dissonance or this conflict. And that's another thing that's going on in America. So what we saw in the camps of North Korea were the formal communist education. Then they were involved in self-criticism and criticism of America. And then finally, they were subject to censorship of reality and truth. Remember, they weren't getting any good mail home that said, we're praying for you, we're waiting for you, all is well, we'll hold down the fort till you get back. No, they were being stripped of reality, told your family doesn't care. No, your family does care. There's a ton of letters. We're just not giving them to you. So they're stripped of reality. And that's exactly what's happening today. We're censoring people from reality. We're censoring and deplatforming people so they can't speak the truth and give reason, logic, and context. So formal communist education, social justice, socialism, the good of the group over the good, right of the individual. So formal communist education, self-criticism and criticism of America, and then censoring reality and truth. And those three steps will take you a long way to brainwashing people.
Very true. And I could, Brian, I could literally listen to you for 4 more hours and I could have questions for 4 more years. But unfortunately, we're coming to an end of our episode here. So let's do what seems to be needed right now. Why don't you tell me and our audience that within this chaos, within this what seems to be darkness, at least for us Christians, and all across the world, not just in America, for us Christians, there is not just hope, but there is a promise, which is Jesus Christ. So you want to finish on that note?
Yes, and thank you, Annie. And in fact, in the POW camps of North Korea, the one constant they found of those who did not succumb to the brainwashing were those that had faith, courage, and personal responsibility. Faith, courage, and personal responsibility. And I also, in this documentary, interview 3 men that were part of the Vietnam War and were in the Hanoi Hilton and brutally tortured for 6 to 8 years. Most of them 6.5 years that I interviewed. Now, to a man, they say faith, faith. So that's interesting, isn't it? That for those who have faith, something outside themselves, that's what helped them to persevere. And as Christians, that's exactly what we know to be true, that the empowering of the Holy Spirit, a supernatural strength and perseverance that only the Lord can give us. And that's exactly why we as Christians are persevering, because we realize that if we really believe what we say we believe, then we cannot betray our Judeo-Christian worldview heritage, because to do so is to betray Christ. And the world is watching to see how Christians are going to respond and are responding during this time. And Mike Lindell is getting a great example to be on the front page of so many papers. And what did he say when the FBI stopped him the other day? He said he was trying to share Christ with them, right? Now that's making news. Mike Lindell is sharing Christ with those FBI agents. This is, again, how Christians should be seen by the world. But we know that our hope is not in this world. We're not going to have a pious worldview that says, oh, you know, my home is ultimately heaven. What do I care about this earth? No, that's pious and that's selfish, because we have a lot of people that we need to help protect, right? Who are vulnerable. So we don't want to be pious, but we also understand ultimately what the Bible says is going to happen to Christians. All who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. That's what the Bible says. All, not some of us. All who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. The Bible also says, I've become your enemy because I tell you the truth. I become your enemy because I tell you the truth. Christians are being persecuted, and those who represent the Judeo-Christian worldview are being persecuted because they do represent truth. And truth is that which is consistent with the character and nature of God. So as Christians, we persevere, understanding that what we're doing is far beyond ourselves. It's really being ambassadors for God and being a good soldier of Jesus Christ and representing him. And we believe there actually not only comes strength with that and empowerment, but protection. But ultimately, we also know in the Bible, there comes great rewards that the Bema seat of Christ, those of us who persevere like this, our salvation isn't dependent on this. Our salvation is dependent on faith in Christ alone. But there will be rewards at the Bema seat of Christ for those who have persevered and have earnestly contended for the faith as we're doing. And that's my encouragement to the audience, to keep going, to contend earnestly.
Amen. Sunday, September 18, 6 p.m. Central Time, correct?
7 p.m. Central, 7 to 10, 3 hours.
Where do we go to watch this?
frankspeech.com, wvwtv.com/live, wvwtv.com/live, frankspeech.com. You can watch it there, and then we'll find somewhere to put it online. Probably at brainwashedthemovie.com is where we'll archive it. But to watch it streamed live, frankspeech.com, wvwtv.com/live. Those are the two places you can watch it. 7 p.m. Central Time, Sunday night, 7 to 10 Central.
Perfect. And to our audience here at Glazov Gang, every day, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Central Time, you can hear Brannon on radio. You can hear his half-an-hour daily news the way you find it nowhere else on Lindell TV again, from 7 p.m. Central to 7:30. And then his Brannon House Live is 7:30 to 9 p.m. Central Time every day. Brannon, I don't know how you do it, but I am grateful that you do it. Keep up the good work. Thank you so very much for your time and your wisdom that you shared with us today.
Thank you, Annie. You're so gracious. We love having you on our team. Thank you.
Absolutely a pleasure. And to our audience, thank you so much. Make sure to tune in Sunday, September 18, 7 p.m. Central Time, frankspeech.com, Lindell TV if you have it, or you can go to www.tv.com. Tune in, don't miss it. Tell all your friends, tweet it, Facebook it, truth it, Getter it, everything. Get everybody to watch Brainwashed America Part 2. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay vigilant. God bless you, and God bless America. Goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, I recently got one of Mike Lindell's pillows and comforters at mybillow.com, and I started getting some of the most restful sleeps in my life. And you can do the same. Go to mypillow.com and use code GG21 to get incredible and amazing discounts. Or just call 1-800-854-0673. While you're doing that, you'll know that you're supporting Mike Lindell, a true American hero fighting a true American cause. And you'll also be supporting the Glazov Gang. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless America.